Hey guys, welcome back. So I'm a little bit of a liar. We're not doing Angled Lantern again this week. We are actually moving into Scam. Been playing this deck a lot in paper, really loving it. So I figured we'd take it on to Moto and see how it goes. This list is a little bit different from what I'm playing in paper. We'll get to that in just a moment. Um, so the whole deck is based. It's really black red mid range, but you have the potential here for some really aggressive starts, thanks to the evoke elementals and Dragavans. So we got mana base black red. We got Blackglade Cliffs, Blood Crypts. We got one Castle Lockthwain for some card draw later in the game. Couple of basic swamps. Then just a bunch of fetches. We do have one Graven Cairns for a filter if we need it. Then we get four copies of Thoughtseize here. A little bit of hand disruption in there. We get four copies of Ragavan, because if you're playing Ragavan, you're going to play four. If you're playing Red and Modern, you're playing Ragavan. And two Lightning Bolts, a little bit of removal there. Three Terminates for some more removal, as well as Kolaghan's Command. Can also function as removal, hand hate, bring a Ragavan back to your hand, etc., etc. Um, For the rest of our creature base, we got four copies of Dauthi Voidwalker. Just a good 3/2 creature. Needs to be removed because it, you know, incidental graveyard hate, and it can be blocked. It's got that shadow ability, so hard for the opponent to stop it if they don't have a removal spell for it. As well as we get to play things that would have gone to our opponent's graveyard if we want to. Really fun to play Dauthi Voidwalker than Thoughtseize a Tron player and take their Ulamog and then just crack your Voidwalker. I've done that once or twice, and that there's nothing like beating the Tron player with their own Ulamog and using it to blow up their Tron lands. For the rest of our creatures, we got four copies of Seasoned Pyromancer. Good way to just kind of cycle cards out of our hand that we don't necessarily want and turn them into elementals. Draw two cards, and it has some graveyard function where we can exile it and make two more elementals. Um, four copies of Grief for more hand hate, as well as being a 3/2 menace that we can play on turn one and stick, as well as Fury, more removal. Half the time we're playing Fury, he's going to be a 4/4 double striker, which is just a fantastic thing to have. To make sure these guys stick around on turn one, we have four different cards here that will make that happen. We got Feign Death, Malakir Rebirth, which also is a MDFC, so we can play it as a land if we need to. Undying Evil is a one of, and two copies of Undying Malice. Now, um, personally, um, it's on this list and my paper list as well. I'm most likely going to cut Undying Evil, and just go with another copy of either Feign Death or the Undying Malice. And the reason for that is because these guys just say when it dies, bring it back with a +1/+1 counter on it. So we can evoke Fury or Grief on turn one, and then just cast this, and it'll die to the evoke, and then come back. We get the ETB again, and we have a big creature ready to go really early in the game. But because this brings these back with a +1/+1 counter on it, Undying Evil actually gives it Undying, so it would only come back if it didn't already have a +1/+1 counter on it. So there's been times where I'll basically scam a Grief, so turn one evoke Grief, then Undying Malice, bring it back, and later in the game the opponent will try to kill it. But the only Undying spell I've got in my hand is the Undying Evil, which doesn't work because it already had the +1/+1 counter on it. So I'm probably going to cut the Undying Evil for another copy of one of the other two. That's just my personal preference, which I think is probably the better option. Honestly, I don't even know why they're split so much. I mean, you could easily do, four copies of Feign Death, three copies of Undying Malice, and just cut the Malakir Rebirth too, because the Malakir Rebirth doesn't give it a +1/+1 counter, and you lose two life. I think the one benefit that the Malakir Rebirth has is that it gives you two more lands since you are only running 19 actual lands. And even with those 19 lands, very, very few of them actually make mana. Most of them are your fetch lands. We're also running two copies of Blood Moon in the main deck, as well as two copies of Fable the Mirror Breaker. Really fun to use Fable to copy a Grief or a Fury, and just repeat that ability. Now, in my paper list, I don't have Fables yet, so I'm just running 4 copies of Blood Moon, which has also been fantastic. Sideboard, get Magus of the Moon, so basically a third Blood Moon effect that doesn't die to the enchantment hate. We get 2 copies of Fatal Push for a little bit more removal, 2 copies of Surgical Extraction for some graveyard hate, uh, Sudden Edict for like a Boggles matchup, stuff like that. That's probably going to be removed for Shieldred's Edict at some point. 2 copies of Turok, um, really good. Make the opponent discard. It gets some plus one counters, protection from white, so it doesn't get beaten by like Solitude or Prismatic Ending, stuff like that. So really good for like the Evoke Elementals matchup or the Omnath Elementals matchup, because number one, it can just block Omnath all day. But also most of the removal is the Furies, or not, well, Fury, it does die to Fury, but most of the removal is the Solitudes, the Prismatic Endings, bouncing things with Teferi, all of which the Turok has protection from. And we get 2 copies of Necromentia, really good for those combo decks. If you can fire it off really quickly, as quickly as turn 2 with the Ragavan, um, you could, snag hammers from Hammer Time. Um, any kind of really important thing you do not want to see coming down, just get rid of them, out of the game. Don't have to worry about them anymore. 2 copies of Unlicensed Search for more graveyard hate. 2 copies of Engineered Explosives. Really good against Hammer over here as well. And then my favorite card, probably in the sideboard besides the Magus, because I always had a soft spot for Blood Moon. Um, Hidetsugu Consumes All. So those are or Saga in the sideboard. Enters battlefield, destroy all non-land permanents with 1 CMC or less. Now that can hurt us a little bit by blowing up a Ragavan or some Seasoned Pyromancer tokens, but normally when we're playing this, we're blowing up the opponent's, Colossus Hammers, or opposing Ragavans, or maybe they've got Chalice R1, stuff like that that's hurting us. This just does away with all of it. Second stage, exile a graveyard, so we get more graveyard hate. And then it transforms into a creature. A 3/3 with trample. Whenever it deals damage, does not say to a player, so any damage. So if it blocks a Ragavan, if it swings in and gets blocked, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Now, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, actually deals damage, not combat damage, because there are ways to just have it deal damage. If it has dealt 10 or more damage to that player this turn, they lose the game. So even if the opponent's like on a life gain deck or something along those lines, and we're able to land this and start beating in, then we've done a bunch of damage, or they might still be above 20, but since we've done 10 damage with this guy, they still lose. So that's our deck. Probably gonna be a really quick one today because my kid's sleeping. So obviously not sure when she's gonna get up. So probably only a couple rounds, but we're gonna get in what we can, and we will see you guys in just a moment for round 1.